So they learn how to communicate, and then they start integrating all these new, at the beginning of the war, they're fighting with kind of cast off, French weapons, Japanese weapons from World War II, captured American weapons, but then, by 1967, they've got AK-47s, they've got RPGs, they've got, 51 caliber Soviet heavy machine guns, they've got anti-aircraft guns, they've got rocket, they've got, big rockets and heavy mortars. And they're able to basically, weave them all into sort of a tactical plan that puts maximum, that inflicts maximum casualties on American units in every encounter, right? Mm-hmm. So, and that becomes part of their thing is they link this to the whole information war. They say the one thing that's going to drive the Americans out is casualties, And so by 1968, they're killing 200 Americans every week in Vietnam. Mm-hmm. 1968, 14,000 Americans die in Vietnam in that single year, and something like 95,000 wounded in that single year. And they this is part of their plan. This is how we get the Americans out of the war. We make them suffer. Now they're suffering much heavier casualties, right? But they don't care. For them, this is like a war of national redemption. They're going to put paid to the whole colonial past, and they're going to reunify the country, and they're going to make a socialist economy that's good for everyone. Blah blah blah. And they're just like, this is the price. We'll pay it.
Mm-hmm. I feel like part of it as well was the brutality that those casualties were in Vietnam. I mean, not that there's any good casualty in war. Obviously, World War I and World War II saw their own versions of suffering, but there is something very bleak about the way, with a mix of modern weapons, it being in the jungles of Vietnam, oftentimes, at night surrounded, there was also that type of real darkness around it for, a U.S. soldier coming back home and saying, what they saw around them, during the conflict.
Yeah. No, I mean, I have so many favorite books about Vietnam, but, you take a novel like Karl Marlantes, Matterhorn. It's like I still get chills just thinking about it. Because I mean, it's a long book. It's like 550 pages or something. And I put it off for a long time because I thought, God, this book is just so long. Whereas you read Dispatches or the things they carried. You got it in a night, right? But this is a couple of weeks of reading. Mm-hmm. Oh my God! But it just sucks you in, and you can't stop reading. And it does it's about the Marines in I Corps, which is the bloodiest theater of the Vietnam War. 65% of American casualties in any given year are in I Corps, because that's where the NVA is coming through the DMZ, or they're coming by Quai Son and turning in that way across the Laotian border. And so there's just more enemy there, right? And but it gets to exactly what you're talking about. It's just the randomness of death and the awful deaths, all these booby traps. One of my first memories of Vietnam was I was a little kid, and my dad went to college with this guy who had a lake house on the Finger Lakes in New York, and we were at their lake house for a week in the summer, and one of this guy's daughters was dating a Vietnam vet who had just come back. And I remember I walked up, they were sitting on the edge of the dock, and I kind of walked up behind him, and I was about to dive in, and I looked down, and the guy's legs are dangling off, and they were all scarred, really horribly scarred. And I said, well, what happened to you? And he's like, a booby trap, And it's these booby traps were everywhere. And just had no idea. Anywhere you went, if you were, even if you're in a really remote area, well, you have to use the trails, because otherwise you can spend the whole day just hacking through the bamboo and the undergrowth, and it would take forever to get anywhere. So you use the trails, and the enemy knows that. So they booby trap everything. And so somebody's going to get it, right? And then if you're in a populated area, they know where you're every hedgerow, with every gap in a hedgerow, there's a little piece of fishing line, and you snag it on your helmet cover, your pants or something, with fish hooks on it or something, and it snags on you, and you pull the detonator, boom. Bernard Fall, that very famous French academic who got his PhD in the U.S. and became one of the great historian of the French war in Indochina, and then becomes the great historian of the American war in Indochina. He was a real muddy boots analyst, and he's marching in near Hue with a Marine unit, 1967, steps on a mine, or the guy next to him steps on a mine, blows up, So it's just, and then when the firefights break out, if the NVA or the Viet Cong have judged, we're going to stand and fight here because the odds favor us, that's when they would fight. When they would say, wait a minute, that platoon is so far from that platoon, we can fight this platoon before they have time to scramble air power or before they have time to get good effective fire from their fire base, and that platoon is never going to get over here in time to help. So they'll fight a real battle against this platoon or this squad. And when those, it's just like hell. They're in position, they're in bunker lines, or they're in sort of enfilading positions, and they're just like take you in this vicious crossfires, and they're lobbing in grenades and mortar fire and machine gun fire, and they're really fast because they know they have to like break off the action and get away before the airstrikes come in. Right? But it's just like and that's why you hear all these numbers like the life expectancy of a second lieutenant in Vietnam once fire breaks out is like 2 minutes or less. The life expectancy of a radio operator, the guy carrying the tactical radio who's always next to the lieutenant, 2 minutes or less. The life expectancy of the guy carrying the pig, the M60 machine gun, 2 minutes or less. Because the enemy, talking about adapting, they figure out, okay, who do we have to kill? If there's an ambush, who do we kill first? We kill the lieutenant because he's the guy on the radio. We kill the radio operator, so he can't carry the radio to the squad leader, who takes over from the lieutenant if he's killed, right? And then we definitely kill the M60 machine gunner because he's got all the firepower, right? So they're very, very calculated about who they, how when they begin the ambush, they're always firing at the platoon leader, the RTO, and the machine gunner.
What were some of the most common booby traps that were used in Vietnam? Because I feel like, not to say pop culture, because that gives it like a positive spin, but you see like there's always the portrayals of it in different movies and stuff, and it's like, has it gotten Hollywoodized in terms of like what they're showcasing? So what were the booby traps looking like in Vietnam?
Well, it was essentially they had an unlimited supply of high explosive because of all the unexploded American ordnance. So remember we talked earlier about how we dropped 22 million tons of bombs.
Yeah.
Most of it on South Vietnam, right? Think of all the duds, all these like B-52 raids. How many of those bombs didn't explode, right? Because they hit a tree and the fuse didn't go off, right? Or they buried themselves in the mud and the fuse didn't explode the bomb. So, and then the same with all these 8,000 fire bases around South Vietnam spewing 105 and 155 millimeter shells. How many of those are duds? A lot, right? So basically what they do is they grab all these duds, and the Viet Cong has many levels. They've got their sort of main force units, which are comparable to NVA regular units. They've been trained, officered by NVA, and they fight with the same tactics as the NVA. And then you've got these kind of local force and then regional force, Viet Cong. And all of these local force have guys who are adept at recovering unexploded American munitions, bringing them back to base.